Fit fam, it is Coach Rye from Team Flex, and today we are talking everything the upper glute. I'm going to tell you why it's important, why you need it, what it is, the muscle anatomy, everything. Why don't you have it? How to get it, with what warm-ups, what exercises, and everything else, and why is it important? And first off, let me tell you, if you're a bikini or wellness competitor, or you're coaching bikini or wellness competitors, you absolutely must watch this video all the way through, because this will be a huge differentiating factor for you on stage, period. It can be the difference of if you win your show, get your overall, get a pro card, or do well at pro shows. That's what we're going to talk about today. Make sure you're subscribed, and this is kind of part of a series I might be doing for moving forward, getting really in depth with all different types of physiques and muscles and how to do this, how to do that, maybe even getting into some courses and some guides. So if you do like this video, please give me a thumbs up and drop in the comments. Let me know that you like this, you want more of this, and I'll see if I can put together an actual real guide course that goes much more in depth than we can do on YouTube here, all right? So let's get into it. So the upper glute, first thing you have to understand is why it's important for bikini and wellness, and kind of what the judges are looking for. So we're gonna look at this wellness athlete here real quick, and as you can see, this is a back pose. It's one of the main poses you will do in wellness, same in bikini, and we'll look at bikini in just a second. But first things first, we want to note this upper glute, okay? So the upper glute zone is right here. It's actually the glute medius. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But really what this does is it creates that shape and that fullness for the judges to see. They'll be able to actually see, that the glutes have that development. It's a very good indicator for them that you've actually been training, accordingly. You have the right fullness. You have the right muscle development. Let's not forget, in wellness and bikini both, judges are still looking for the actual muscle development. And here's a bikini athlete. Obviously much less developed than wellness overall, but still you will see this upper glute shape. Now, this is really important because if you don't have this, judges are going to know that you don't have the right muscle development, and it's really easy for them to tell because they actually sit below you. This is kind of a cool example. I think I'm actually on this stage somewhere in this picture from the mother load, but it's kind of blurry. But the point is, here's where the judges sit, okay? Judges are down here in this kind of zone, and they're literally looking up at you athletes while you're on stage. So if you imagine, right, we're looking at these bikini athletes, this wellness athlete here, straight on. We get a straight on perspective of the upper glute, and that's great. But, if you're sitting at this judging table, if you've ever been to a bodybuilding show and you've been in those first few rows, you're kind of getting a good example. You're literally looking upward at that athlete, right? You're literally looking up at them, and so the perspective you're going to get is going to be different. So if you don't have that upper glute to really show that shape and that fullness, automatically judges are going to score you down, score you differently, and it will make your glutes literally look flat, almost like you got SpongeBob glutes going on here, okay? It's not what you want. Judges don't want to see it. It's not going to help your place, okay? So let's talk now a little bit more about muscle anatomy. And I'm going to breeze by some of this stuff because I don't want to go too in depth and make you be here for 3 hours listening to me talk about this, but it is important to know. So, basically we got different glute muscles going on. Glute max, we're not going to talk about this today. This takes up that portion. We got glute minimus underneath, and really what we're talking about today for that upper glute effect is the glute medius, okay? So this muscle here, it's responsible for a lot of different things, and basically, it's not your glute max, it's going to be your glute med that's going to create that upper effect. So a lot of people think when they go in the gym, they do a lot of squats, hip thrusts, things like that, they're training the glutes, they got to be developing that. Well, realistically, that's not going to happen unless you know the actual function of what the glute med is doing and why it does it and how to actually activate it, train it, and do all that. So we're going to get more into that now, and let's just talk a little bit about what it does. So hip abduction, that means basically leg moving away from the body, okay? So when that's happening, the glute med, it's firing up. It's also responsible for your hip balance. So, if your pelvis is hiked or dropped on either side, that's glute medius taking effect there, especially when you walk or you run or you do other types of cardio, things like that. It's directly responsible for keeping that pelvis stable. It assists in flexion and extension of the hip. So ladies, you're thinking back pose, you're thinking where you're getting that extension, that tilt of the pelvis, it's activating there. That's why we can see it a lot in that back pose too. It assists in internal and external rotation. As the leg goes in, the leg goes out. You're internally and externally rotating at the leg, doing various exercises. It's working there for you too. It assists in, overall, just basically everything there horizontal plane abduction of the hips, stuff like this. I'm getting too in depth, I know, but it's good for you to know this because it's going to relate more to the exercises in just a sec when we talk about those. Now, one question I get all the time from athletes is, why don't I have that upper glute, Coach Rye? I mean, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work to build this, and you know, you could be training 5-10 years trying to build your glutes, and you might not have a very developed upper glute if you didn't understand how to actually train this. There's also a lot of things that come into external factors, such as lifestyle, right? So if you are sitting too much, which many of us do, right? A lot of us sit for work or, you know, school or whatever it is you're doing with your life. You might be sitting, and that's going to be an effect where kind of when you're sitting on your glutes, what I always say is when you're sitting on your glutes, you're sleeping on your glutes, like you're turning them off, right? Like basically you're doing nothing. You're kind of, you know, compressing them, and they just don't get the same amount of effect and things like that when you're training if you're actually sitting a lot. So that's one thing. Another thing a lot of people do is standing, right? We stand at work, we stand at our job. Some of you may stand, and that might be what you do all day. But when you actually shift your weight to one leg or another, which so many people are guilty of, right? You could just be doing that even probably right now if you're standing somewhere listening to this. If you're shifting your weight over to one side or not, you're creating that kind of hip imbalance where that may take effect of, okay, now that we're not getting as good proprioception, we're not getting as good activation, things like that when we're training. Mainly though, I will say this, the most things come down to people not activating that upper glute, that glute medius enough, and also not doing the correct exercises in the right way to target it, okay? So now I wanna move specifically into more, let's talk about the warm-ups, let's talk about those activation drills, and let's talk about exercises. And let's also remember that this video could be literally forever. I'm not gonna take forever today, but if you are liking this, this is the kind of content you wanna see more of, even guides and things like that to tell you more about these things. Please make sure you subscribe, you comment, you give me a thumbs up, let me know so that I know where to head with it, all right? We're gonna do a lot more of this if you're liking it, and I sure hope you are. So here's how we get it. Here's how we get that upper glute, that glute medius to really fire up. First thing, it's a hack, it's a trick. A lot of coaches don't even know about this kind of stuff, but it's self-myofascial release, okay? And this comes down to rolling. This can be foam rolling, this can be lacrosse balls, other types of massage balls. I say lacrosse ball because I really like that intensity, that density of that ball. That's what I would suggest for you, but if you're very new to rolling, never done it, you may need to start with something softer. Could be a tennis ball, something like that. But basically what you do when you go into self-myofascial release is you're actually getting in there and you're working on the muscle, kind of bringing up the proprioception, but you're also working the myofascial tissue. So the myofascial tissue is this tissue that's all over every type of muscle in your body. It's on pretty much literally most living organisms in some way or another, especially animals and things like that. So like for example, chicken breast. Many of you listening to this video, I'm sure have seen a raw chicken breast before. It's kind of like that white skin that you'll see sometimes on that actual chicken breast. That's kind of that myofascial tissue which you have in your body. So if this tissue gets gunked up, it's not moving properly, it's not sliding and gliding the way it should when you're doing exercises, you're basically impacting the way you're going to be able to activate that muscle. So not only are you going to get better proprioception of the muscle, which basically means a roadmap, and we'll talk more about that in a second, you're going to get a lot of benefit from actually breaking that tissue free and making sure it can slide and glide. And the thing is, if you go try this, you try to roll out on this, you sit on that actual lacrosse ball and you start working in a glute, you're probably going to want to scream right away, all right? Because it's going to hurt. It's going to feel painful. But if you feel pain when you do this, it's really a big indicator that you're not getting as good function of that myofascial tissue or of the muscle, and you could be making a lot more progress and building a lot faster in every kind of way if you were actually doing that. So very important to pay attention to that, and you'll notice over time as you go and you continue to roll out, it gets better and better and it hurts less and less because that tissue itself is actually getting healthier and you're getting better gains the entire time you're doing this. And you might have heard I said proprioception, right? Kind of big words, Coach, right? No, not really. Basically what this means, right, it's like it's the nerve endings in the muscle and how the muscle relates to where it's at in space. It's basically your body's awareness, right? So if you're training and you're in the gym and you're doing exercise, you're like, okay, I'm supposed to do squats, I'm doing hip thrusts, all this. Well, if that area is not firing up, it's not going to work, right? And so, like I said, we're inhibiting these areas a lot in daily life and other things. And if you haven't activated it and don't know how to train it, it's going to impact differently for how you're going to actually be able to grow, hypertrophy, and do everything else with that muscle in general. Just get it stronger. So the way you can really think of this is if you've ever had bad cell service somewhere, maybe you were traveling, you know, you're looking at your phone trying to figure out a roadmap somewhere you've never been, the service isn't very good, you know, it doesn't populate the whole screen. You might see your little blue dot on your phone or whatever it is, but you're not seeing the roads and everything populate correctly. That's kind of how you can think of this. When you roll out and you hit this glute and you start really working that area and you get that myofascial tissue and you get those nerve endings fired up, all of a sudden you've populated that roadmap better, and your body goes and you go do the same exercises you've done, and now you're getting a lot better activation overall out of that muscle. You're getting much better just function, and it's going to operate to a degree where, okay, now boom, here we are, we're firing up stuff that we haven't fired up, and you're sore and making gains. And I know I'm talking a lot here, and this is pretty in depth, but hopefully you're hanging out with me, doing some cardio, something like that, learning. I'm telling you, if you stick to the end, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be able to get this upper glute, and it will make a huge difference for you on stage in general, period. No matter where you want to go, you have to have this, all right? So I'll try to speed up the rest bit here because I know I can talk too much. I told you guys. All right, so warm-up exercises. I mean, everybody should be doing that myofascial release, doing that constantly. You can do that, you know, every single day. If you do it before training, it's gonna be really effective for helping you actually build that up. But, you know, the more you do it, the better. You can't do it too much. It's not gonna do any damage to you. It's only gonna help you, okay? So definitely make sure that's in part of your routine. The minimum I would say is do that before literally every single lower body day, and that's gonna be a big difference for you, okay? So let's get down into literally the first kind of activation warm-up exercises. This is gonna help kick up that glute med right away. And remember, don't skip your warm-ups. When you're doing your warm-up and you're doing this correctly, it literally enhances every single exercise you do after the fact. A lot of times when I get new clients and I train them, I put them through warm-ups, do all this, make them roll out like you guys listen to this, you're probably like, what the heck, I'm not gonna ever do that. Well, the ones that do, they, you know, make progress that people think is like years and years down the road, but no, it's just been a couple months of actually training, warming up, and doing all these things correctly. So I definitely suggest do not skip the warm-up. So we're talking about lateral band walk. This is pretty easy. You place the band, you know, right above your knee, stand with your feet hip width apart, squat down in athletic stance, which basically means, you know, half squat or so, and then you take a step to the left, to the right, so on and so forth. You can do this in a number of different ways, where basically you can walk one way for, you know, 5-10 steps, walk the other way 5-10 steps, or just go back and forth, whatever you want to do with that. But basically you're walking and you're activating this muscle, really kind of firing it up, getting everything there, and it's directly targeting several of those factors we talked about for how this muscle actually gets targeted in, you know, the actual function of it. So very beneficial exercise. That's a really good one, really cool one. Definitely suggest that. Another one is lateral band hip abduction. So you're actually laying on your side, you're using the band again. You'll notice the band a lot when we're talking about upper glute because it's just a really good way to fire it up. But hip abduction, you're kind of laying sideways. You put that band on, you know, the same spot, just right above the knees. You can also do the ankles. Ankles will be harder. Start with the knees if you've never done this. And basically you're laying sideways and you just raise your leg up. And you bring it back down, and that's going to be the same kind of motion, this kind of adduction zone where we're bringing the leg away from the body like I talked about, to the point where we're abducting, hitting everything the way we want, getting that activation. So that's another nice one. Band squats are pretty basic. Put the band above your knees, you squat down, come back up. You can do this where you kind of change your stance every now and then. You could do wider, more narrow, sumo, whatever. Kind of just really firing up these muscles. The bands pay off big. And band bridges is another one. Lying on the floor, you can do it. You could do it off a bench, but basically still just driving the knees out into that band, same kind of placement, and doing bridges to fire up the glutes. Here's one that many of you probably aren't doing. It's actually really good. Single leg wall sit. Okay, so wall sits, a lot of people, you know, kind of hate these from the high school or college sports where it's almost a punishment from coaches and stuff like that. But wall sits are actually a really good exercise if you need to really hit that upper glute, but only if you do it in that single leg. And this is more of an isometric, so it kind of really activates it. But basically you're sitting up against the wall, put your back on the wall, keep it together, and you're using one leg to stand there and support yourself. So you're forcing that balance of the pelvis, of the hips, firing up that glute med. You're going to want to do both sides here, and I would say, you know, do at least a minute each side. Could be up to 90 seconds. The more you do, the better it's going to activate before your training. So if you bring any of those kind kind of exercises into your warm-up after you roll out, that's going to be fantastic for making sure we're hitting that upper glute, doing literally everything else you do the rest of the day, okay? So that's really important. And there's a lot of other different exercises. That's not the whole list at all. If you want more, comment it, let me know, make part 2, or put it in the guide. Now I want to talk about actual exercise selection. So some of these are going to seem similar. Some of them, may not. Some of you probably doing a lot of these. Some of you probably not doing any of them. So really important. Stick around with me to the end. Let's see. Banded knee barbell hip thrusts. Okay. Really, really good exercise. You got to be doing hip thrusts if you want to target glutes. But when you add the band, we get to target the upper glute a lot more. And many of you are probably doing some variation of a hip thrust. Try it with the booty band, okay? And we do this tons on Team Flex. I have pretty much all my clients doing bikini and wellness will be doing this. Just depending, and they may not if it's not needed for their physique, but pretty much everybody is. And so really what you're doing on this exercise, you put the band right above the knees again, you got the barbell across your hips, and you're gonna go down and you're gonna really drive up, squeeze your glutes, get that full extension, hold it, lock it out, make sure you're getting that activation there, and then bringing it back down to start position, all while driving your legs out the entire time. What this really does is it fires up the upper glute, and if you haven't used a band for this, or you haven't used a strong band, let me say, you're gonna notice huge differences in how your upper glute feels and the activation you're getting, and really how much progress you get when you do that. And if you are doing this with a band and you don't feel any difference, probably not using a band heavy enough. We should say that too. The band strength has to be at your kind of level. So if you're brand new to the gym, you might use a very light band. But if you've been doing this stuff for years and you got pretty high PRs on most lifts and stuff like that, you're very proficient in the gym, you need a stronger band to get the same benefit. So keep that in mind. Single leg hip thrusts now. This is another cool one. You're not going to do as much weight here as on the other hip thrust, right? You're not going to get that same effect, doing big heavy weights, compound stuff there. But what you do on the single leg is you get to isolate. So a lot of people have this imbalance between their hips. You might have one glute that's more developed than the other. You might have one leg that's more developed than the other. You might have a hike or a drop in the pelvis, stuff like that. That's kind of an imbalance. One way to correct that is single leg stuff, single limb action, basically, where if we take a hip thrust and we're doing it single leg now, well, what's happening is we're isolating one side, but we're also getting a lot more of the glute medius to activate, by far more than even the banded, knee hip thrusts, because basically what we're getting out of this now is this whole balance effect, which is part of what the glute medius really does. So you're basically doing the same type of hip thrust action. You can do it with a barbell if you want. You could also use a dumbbell, things like that, or even just body weight, depending on your level. But basically doing this single leg action is going to be a big difference in how you kick up the glute med, all right? So number 3 exercise I got for you here. This is a sideline hip raise. This one's generally done body weight, but you can also do it with a weight on your hips, something like that. Basically, you're just laying on your side and you're gonna raise your hips off the ground, and you're gonna kick that leg up at the same time as you do this. So basically it's this sideline hip raise where we're gonna get that benefit. And this is cool because you can do this anywhere, right? If you're one of these people that really want to build your upper glute and you have a deficit there, you can be banging this thing out on your lunch break at work somewhere. I don't know what you're doing, where you're at, or you travel, you're in a hotel, you're wherever. You can do this without weight. You don't need a bunch of fancy equipment, and it will really hit that upper glute zone, all right? Single leg box squats, another single leg action exercise. This one probably most people don't do. I don't see this a lot in gyms. I don't see people doing this a lot unless I'm giving them programming. So this is one where it's, again, another single leg exercise, which is really helpful to that upper glute. And it's also good because we're getting kind of separation between the actions here, anterior, posterior, muscles front of the body, muscles back of the body as we do this, because we're actually taking a full seat. So basically, you're doing a normal squat. You're going to do this probably body weight or with a dumbbell, nothing too crazy, nothing too heavy. And basically how it works is you're going to sit back, sit down, you're standing on one leg this entire time. You go fully seated in the box, you come back up pushing through. And what you're going to get out of this is a lot of benefit to that upper glute, but also, again, any postural issues you got, lower body, or imbalances muscle-wise, stuff like this, single leg action, ladies and gents, is the key to fixing those things. So really important that you do that, and that's a great exercise for it too. Seated band hip abduction. Okay, this one is basically like the abductor machine, but you know, the machine's not as good as the band in some senses. Sometimes I'll combine them, sometimes I'll just give them a machine. It depends on the person, where we're at and what we're trying to do. But basically, this is another cool one. If you got a band, you're traveling, you're somewhere else, you're at work, whatever, you want to bust out some upper glute in the middle of the day, hit it, okay? Because you can do it with a band. Same kind of thing. You're sitting, you want to be upright, you want to have that position, and you get to really just drive the legs out, work into that upper glute a ton. This is one of the top ones, and one most of you are probably doing, but try it with a band, try it more often. And we haven't talked about sets or reps. We're going to in just a minute for all these. I just want to talk about the exercises for a second here and give you some of those tips. All right, and the last one I want to talk about today is single leg deadlift, okay? This is a very common exercise, a lot of people doing it, but I also see a lot of people not doing it because they don't have the balance, right? How many of you ever tried to do a single leg deadlift and you feel like, oh, I just don't have the balance, I can't do it, I'm falling all over the place, it's too awkward, I'm gonna do something else, I'm gonna go do a hamstring curl or something. Well, if you do that, you're losing the whole benefit of the upper glute, because literally that is what the upper glute, this glute medius, is doing for you in this exercise, is the balance factor. It's keeping you stable, it's keeping you balanced, it's really working a ton here on that standing leg. So definitely do not be skipping the single leg deadlift if you have this upper glute zone to build. And I'll tell you what, 99% of feedback that you're going to get as a competitor on stage from judges as you climb the ranks from, you know, novice to intermediate to pro and beyond is going to be build the upper glute more, build the upper glute, build the upper glute, build the upper glute. Judges are going to hammer it, they're looking for it, they got to see it, otherwise your glutes look flat. So do not be skipping the exercises that benefit you. And so as far as sets and reps go, that's the only exercise I want to talk about today. Again, if you want to hear more, drop in the comments, I'll keep making these. But basically, sets and reps wise, it's gonna depend where you're at. Generally, these exercises will be done with higher reps. And of course, this is not your entire glute workout. And I'm not saying just go to the gym and do these 6 exercises I talked about. Overall, we're talking about basically the factor of these are some good ways to really get that activation, really bring things to the party, and then everything you do after is gonna help a lot. These exercises will help target the upper glute even more, that glute medius. So work them into your routine for sure, and keep your staples, keep all those things there. If you really need, you know, help with your programming, stuff like that, we do offer a 7-day free coaching trial for any of you out there. We built some epic glute mediuses, okay? We got athletes in all levels on stages and every bikini wellness all over, from beginner to pro, first time to pro shows and beyond, getting pro cards, whatever it is, we're doing it. And we're doing it with these kind of tips, these tricks, these hacks, these things I gave you a little taste of in this video today. And remember, this is just a little taste, ladies and gents. We got a lot more. So if you want a more in-depth version of that, go check out the free coaching trial, teamfflex.com. That's free, no obligation, no putting money in, stuff like that. I'll show you more exercises, teach you more, give you, it's specific to your physique. And if you don't do that, you're kind of crazy, I'm gonna be honest with you. But either way, I'm gonna hopefully be making more of these videos, coming out with some guides, some courses that go more in depth, talk a lot more about stuff, and really give you more in depth tools, tips, hacks, things like that to make you your best competitor on stage. It's kind of my mission in life, and it's really my mission in life these days right now, is to kind of just give you all the stuff that nobody wants to tell you, or they just want to sell you. That's what Coach Rye is about at Team Flex. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate any feedback you got for me. And if you have time, you got competitor friends, share the video for me. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Coach Rye is out.